Hello, welcome to another edition of the Low Code Cafe. This is episode number 161, the one where we talk about upgrading to Plant App 1.26 with ease. So we'll get into that and some other things that are associated with that upgrade, tools that might be useful. But in the meantime, or first, let me introduce myself. I am Dale Warner, Head of Support for Plant App, joined today by Patrick Anderson, Technical Support Manager for Plant App. Um, this is an event that we do every other week, bi-weekly, and we just do demos and updates, but we spend the biggest part of our time talking about hands-on low coding. So if you're, we're glad you're here. If you have something that is interesting for the whole community, we would love to host you. You could be our guest speaker, show us what you're building or what you have built. We record all these and put them out on YouTube, youtube.com/plantanap. And so becomes part of the permanent record, something that you can come back to and refer to. We will run a pretty straightforward agenda today. I'm going to do a brief from the trenches segment, talking about some workarounds that came as a result of, well, a conversation with somebody who's already part of this webinar today. And then we will drop into talking about version 1.26. Do engage with us. There's a chat window and our Q&A. You can raise your hand and talk. There's a feedback form that the URL will be on the clipboard here in a minute. As I said, we do this bi-weekly, so the next live event is scheduled for May 22, 2 weeks from now. We are right on the cusp of releasing version 1.26. The release date was May 7, but we've slipped past that, so now we're saying soon. One of our key testers was unavailable. We're going to run through some more tests. So right now we're looking at Monday coming up as the likely release date. And then I've got a couple of things highlighted here. We'll talk today, when we're getting into version 1.26, we're going to talk about customizable URLs, but also some one of the breaking changes. That's going to be the part of the topic of what we're going to do. But these are the main areas of improvement in this. So from the trenches of support, again, I'm the head of support for Plant App, and oftentimes we release hotfixes. We've had a very long release cycle for version 1.25. There were 97 different publicly released hotfixes, but no more today. If there's any more, I would anticipate they're only related to getting upgrade completed. I'm going to talk some today about in my from the trenches some listing efficiency issues and the idea of lazy loading a listing. So the question came yesterday: if you have many listings on a page and they're all on different tabs, you might not want them to load all at once, or maybe load at all based on maybe different roles within, maybe only certain tabs are available. And so let's say you have 10 tabs, you have 10 listings, but only 2 of the tabs are visible. You don't want the inefficiency of loading the other 8 tabs with data. So we got into a discussion about, well, how can we make that happen? And that was there's a kind of a workaround that we have available that makes that possible. So we're going to dive into that a little bit. But I'm going to do it a little bit different today in that we're going to be doing testing of the upgrade. There's some delay time while upgrades apply, and so I'm going to bounce back and forth between this workaround for lazy load and the other main topic. So we'll get into this lazy load thing in just a minute. Beyond that, I encourage you to engage in the Low Code Campfire. This is Fridays at 10 a.m. Central Time. We do that every Friday, and it's a discussion format. So a meeting rather than a webinar, no prepared topics or very few, but we get together, talk about the challenges that you face and solve problems within low code development. You can help solve problems for someone else, or maybe get an assist from us and your fellow low coders. So really worthwhile time to spend on Fridays. So I promised the links for the episode, and Patrick will post those on the chat here for a second. You can register in advance for the Low Code Campfire with that link. There's a webinar getting onto YouTube. There are recordings, our community portal, which is a great place to get questions answered, as well as our support tickets, of course, and then our webinar feedback form. So all that's on your chat. So let's dive into the Master the Move segment, upgrading to Plantain App 1.26. The scenario I have today is that our one of the websites that I presented previously on episode number 148, we had a Plantain app that was running an early version of 1.25, 1.25.105. And so I'm going to demonstrate a brief app that's there. We'll upgrade it to version 126. We'll encounter or anticipate some breaking changes that goes on with this mini app that I have. And so then we'll talk about a global search and replace tool. Plantain app actions are stored inside the SQL database. So being able to search within the SQL database and find the actions and fix them at a SQL level rather than at a one-by-one finding them within your app level. So that's just, we'll just introduce that, and that tool can be used for lots of good things. So that's where we're going. So yeah, let's introduce the app. Find the app. Drop it on here. So Cafe 148, and I'm really not going to talk about what it used to do. I added a mini app here on this page called Cafe 161, and I'm doing 3 of the same things. We have a radio box with a couple of usernames in here. We have the usernames here and a listing and another listing. So behind the scenes, let's take a look at how this is built. I haven't obeyed my own rule here. This is, I haven't named this form. So it's the default name of ABT action form. The one field on this mini app is a radio box. It's populated by our server request JSON data source. And so it says it's coming from a URL, and it's an API call to get the users. So we're doing a server request out to our own website. It's not necessarily the best design, but it's just illustrating a point that we can get data from this get the users API and use it to fill this server request. And so we get the display name and the user ID, and that becomes what fills our button here, or our radio box. And then in the same way, I have a listing, 2 listings, really, they're identical, but I'm just showing that we're going to be able to fix them globally. That the data source is this same URL, so we're getting users from get the users API. So the problem is that, and let's see, I should open this up, but we have a breaking change in that this URL call, desktop modules, DNN sharp, DNN API endpoint, all this long syntax has existed for a long time and is possible to use, but there's a much shorter version, and the shorter version now becomes the only version. So if you have a call to an API, and especially in this case, we're calling our own self here, our own app, you're going to need to change this. It's going to break when we upgrade to 126. So that's going to be that's the problem, the breaking change, and the topic that we're going to address. So that's the system, and so I've demonstrated that. We're going to move on to upgrading to version 126 now. the steps that you would take in a normal upgrade, this is our upgrade path. Of course, you always want to do a backup of both the file system and the database, so that if the upgrade doesn't succeed for any reason, you can restore, which I've already done. Then the recommended path is that you install the hotfixes for version 125, all the hotfixes that are available to you, and then you update to version 1.26. This is the last version that this is really an option for you. Going forward, we are going to enforce that you install all the hotfixes as part of your update. And the idea is that it helps keep everyone on the same path of upgrade. But for this last version, we're not enforcing it. We're just recommending it highly that this is the path. So here we go. And that's the next slide. So let's get these done, the hotfixes for version 1.25. So we go to our site, we look at updates, we see that we're at version 125, 105. And if you look in hotfixes, there's all kinds of hotfixes available. What we always recommend, and I'm going to open this out so you can see all of them, is that the app builder hotfix is always the one that you want to install first, and then install everything else. So we're going to install the app builder hotfix and get that started. If there's questions along the way, happy to entertain them, and Patrick will alert me if someone asks that. So there's the Q&A window in the chat, and you can ask a question. So we are installing, and then we'll install all the others. And so we're going to have 3 different install phases here. So let me do some organization. Goes here. And then this is going to be load. Simple, let that go. Since that's going to take a minute, I'm going to move it over here and we'll come back to it when it's done. So I said we're going to jump around a little bit. So here's lazy load. I have a listing. I have a page. It came back pretty quickly, so we'll go back to this. Get the other updates rolling. So we have now we have 125, 240 installed. That's the main the app builder is the version of app builder is the main version of our product. So now we have a bunch of other hotfixes to install, and we can install those in bulk. Just check the box, say install hotfixes, let it go. So that'll be going on the other screen here. So here's the scenario. I've got a tab that's got lots of different things. It's got a form in it, and it also has a grid, and you can see the grid has data in it already. This grid it takes a long time to load. If I were to refresh the screen, you're going to see it takes a very long time it takes 5 seconds to actually go out and acquire the data for this grid. So it would be kind of useful to load this lazily. And so that's kind of the area where we're going to make the improvement. But here we go back to our upgrade. Patrick or somebody tell me if this is too confusing, me jumping back and forth. I'll quit doing that.
Yeah,
All right.
I think it's okay.
So we've run into one of our kind of known bugs that sometimes you can click and install something and it didn't actually install. So we'll click it and try it again. So now this is worth talking about. In our next version of the product, I've mentioned this before, but we're spending a lot of effort improving this upgrade experience. And so instead of watching the bouncing Plantanet ball, instead you're going to have a window that pops up that tells you step by step what's happening with the upgrade, and then an indication of whether it succeeds. The normal case, of course, that it succeeds or that it fails, but a very positive controlled experience. And if errors happen along the way, that you're going to get alerted to them. So rather than something that is buried in our logs section, it rather would show up as a very visible error. So we're improving this experience, and we're hoping this is the last that you're going to see of some of these experiences where things delay. All right, so I'm going to again let that perk. So let's see if we can illustrate some of the things that are going on. If you, the question of when does a listing load, and trying to lazy load it, one of the ways to illustrate that is if you open up the inspect and go to the network tab, you can see all the things that get loaded. And I'm filtering on fetch/XHR, which are essentially API calls. And one of the API calls, this is the one that you're focused on, where the method is get data. This is the one where the grid gets full. So there's a question I see: is lazy load a workaround in place of tab integration? Yes, there's tab integration, and I guess we should talk about that too. Tab integration is something that would be the preferred method of this, and we will it's on our list to complete the tab integration. So yep, we're going to show that too. Right, back to this finished. All the hot fixes are installed. No updates available, and so we are now set to upgrade to version 126. All right, so just keeping track of where we are. We installed the app builder, we installed everything else, and now we're going to install version 126. My particular version of Plantanet is running on DNN 9.11, and so when I say that I want to upgrade, it's going to offer me the opportunity to upgrade DNN as well. So long as you're running the community version of DNN, this is available to you. If you're running Evoke, it's not available to you. But very easy to upgrade DNN at the same time that you update the product, which is great because here you've already done the backup and you're already prepared to use it. So you get this question, you're about to update, and we're running DNN 9.11.0. You can go to 9.11.2. So if you say yes, you'll also get it. If you say no, you'll just get the update of Plantanet, but without the DNN upgrade. Of course, you can cancel out of the whole thing. So I'm going to say yes and let everything happen all at once here. Yes, so bouncing around, let's go back to the integration that Jeff mentioned. If we look at tabs, and I'm sorry, because I'm doing the DNN 9.11 upgrade, it's popping up and asking 11.0 versus 11.2. You have to log in as your super user, and so I'm going to provide my password, and that's going to say it's ready, and we're going to say upgrade. So now this will go on. Um, in a listing down at the bottom, there's these advanced UI settings. No, tab integration, legacy only. And so the idea is that um, this would be the ideal place where this lazy load kind of thing will take would be working. And it works in our old Bootstrap 3 version, but it was not completed in our Bootstrap 5 version. We're committed to getting fully to Bootstrap 5, so this is on our list to get done. But right now, these things are being ignored when you're using Bootstrap 5. The idea is that you would be able to say load when the tab is activated, and so that way that listing would only get activated when you go to the tab. And so that would in fact be the lazy load we're talking about. Now, there's this other one that's really quite important that says that it would refresh when the tab is activated. So that way, if you're tabbing back and forth, that every time you go to that tab, it would get refreshed, which if things are changing on other tabs, things are changing the data for your listing, this would allow it to stay up to date without having to have another manual click. So these two things are related to this lazy load. I'll just mention our upgrade finished, and there's a visit the website button, and I click that. So now it's starting on the first load of that. That site takes a minute to load. Okay, so we've kind of defined what the problem is. So let's see if what the that's yeah. So we load this site, we refresh the site, and we see that as it is, the get data is loading, even though we're not on the grid form. There's only one grid here on this page. It's here, and it got loaded. So this then defines the problem. If you had 10 grids, 10 grids would load. And another one that we talked about very recently is if you change tabs, that even though you're not visiting the grid tab, we're seeing this load every time you change, and that's a different problem. So let's fix these one by one and get this over with. The sync with URL parameter says every time the URL changes, the listing loads. So when you change tabs, it changes the URL, and so the listing was loading. So first turning that one off is the first step to efficiency. So here we see it loading the first time, but now at least when we change tabs, it's not loading again. And the grid is there visible for us to work with. So now the last and simple step, so we can put this away and just focus on our upgrade, is that if you change the display mode of your listing to manual and save, that now that listing will not load until you go to that tab. So here we go, we're on the overview tab, we're refreshing, we've got all of our calls, and notice there's no call to that get data thing. We go to form, no call to the get data. We go to grid, and there it is, get data. So it's only filling at the time that you go to it. And so now if this page had 10 grids, many of, and I'll say all of them, provide a pretty heavy load on the CPU, on the system. You don't want to load them now, and only the ones that somebody actually visits are being loaded. So this is a reliable way to implement lazy load until we get our Bootstrap 5 thing available. And so if you need this particular resolution, it's available. And I'm going to completely drop that. So here's the spot for questions. And Patrick, did I explain that well, or did I miss anything?
No, yeah, I think so.
All right, so I'm just going to close that up, and we'll go back to our main focus today. All right, so
I'm
yes,
sorry, one thing about that I wanted to mention about that listing you were just on. I don't know if you mentioned it or not, but I think it's worth it that you purposely designed that listing to load slow. I don't know if I don't think you mentioned it. I just wanted to.
Yeah,
That
and
yeah.
I did purposely design it to load slow to take 5 seconds. And and maybe actually you can help me. There's a skeleton. Um, I was showed
Yeah, no, that should be above. Yep.
this one.
Do you not have it? No, it's not that. That's just the loading animation.
And Jeff asked clarification. The only change is setting this display mode to manual. Yes, by just setting it to manual, that it gets hidden, and then the tab navigating into the tab is automatically showing it. Oh, I know where it is. It's here in data table.
Oh, yeah, that's right.
Skeleton
Yeah,
while loading.
yeah.
So show skeleton while loading kinds of provides a nice illustration of this. Um, that as it's loading, you can see this show skeleton while loading provides this kind of waiting, and then here it is, it's done.
And just quick to clarify what Mason said. So the search delay is if you're typing in the search, that does it puts a millisecond delay on on the call to get the results that correspond to your search. But that's not the setting that Dale designed his data source, so it would be slow to load for
Yes.
for demonstration purposes.
Right. So search delay 300 milliseconds. It's not going to actually start doing the search until slightly after I'm completing with my typing. It just gives you a chance to type, and you could change that to 5 seconds or whatever if you want. So to give somebody a chance to completely finish what they're searching for before we start issuing the calls to do a search, because those might be CPU intensive. Okay, so thanks for asking the questions, and we're going to drop away from that. If you have further questions about it, feel free to create a support ticket. All right, so now our focus. We go to we're up resetting where we have updated to 1.26, and we've also done DNN 9.11.2. So now let's just verify that. We are going to our configuration page. We're at version 1.26. If we were to look at, for example, one place to see DNN version is here under servers. 9.11.2. So we got both DNN updated and the version updated. Lovely. So now we go to our page, Cafe 161, and refresh it, and we're going to run headlong into this breaking change. Because that old path no longer works. And we start seeing a useful error message, get the users, please use the following endpoint path. And it's telling us we need to use API get the users instead of the one that has been discontinued and is a breaking change. So so let's put a full stop. We have upgraded to version 126, and as long as you follow this path, we've had very good success with all of our internal testing. Install the hot fixes at builder first, everything else update to 126, and it installs very, very well. So now we're going to go on to dealing with this particular breaking change. In the release notes, which are still kind of here in an incomplete form, they'll be part of what you get before you upgrade. But there's some breaking changes listed, and one of them is that this one, the execute API, nope, this one. API endpoints could be called with the old format, this big long format, but it's no longer supported. And so now instead you're supposed to use the site/API/endpoint name. That's the only way to call an API. So it's listed as a breaking change. And now the rest of this is just going to all be about fixing the breaking change. So let's we have this big ugly page, and one way to fix this would be to go in and edit our find all the places that this was used one by one. In this case, it was used here, and just fix it. We could change this to slash API like that, the short form, and it would work. And I guess we can illustrate, we can go ahead and show this off that it will work. And so notice that this one particular grid now loads correctly because we've made the fix. But you don't know where all those are. So this is where we're going to change them globally and get into our global search and replace tools. So that's here's the thing. We're going to install the global search and replace tool, which is available out on our campfire.plantainapp.com website. And it's available to anybody, whether you are a member there or not. And so let's go ahead and do that. I'm going to click over into it, and I'm going to go through the front door. If you go to campfire.plantainapp.com, you'll see opportunity to view contributions, and the contribution is here, the global search and replace tool. That's what you're going to want to search for. I'm going to click the go button to open that up. And so this tool is available. You can, it is in the form of a workflow, which we could take a look at the workflow, but we can just simply download it. And when you run it, what it does is uses a SQL stored procedure to, and I'll do it. I'm going to search for this very specific text, which happens to exist here on this page. So it's going to find something. But what it does is it goes through every table of your database, every column, to try to find that particular string that you're searching for, and provides a results array that you can work with. You can either work with it programmatically or by hand. And so this is going to be the basis for how we're going to find these calls in the database. So I'm going to go ahead and click the download it here button. This is our workflow, which I'm going to copy the whole thing. And so now it's on my clipboard, and we will go back to our site and install this workflow. So we only have one other workflow left over from when we did Cafe 148. We just say import workflow and paste that content here, and it's going to import. And so now we have, that shows us the workflow, but we can just view it here. It's given us the search all tables, and you can install this and take a look at what it's doing on your system. Just a word of warning, it does go through all your tables. If you've got a lot of data, it might take a while to run. This is a relatively small website, but it is not, it is inherently unharmful to run this search all tables. All right, so what are we doing? Well, we have the problem that this string here is the old way of doing things, and the new way is /API/. And so if we were to find this pretty specific string in our database, we could globally replace it with /API, and our app would start to work again. So that's where we're going. So we're going to run the search all tables workflow and search for that string. The old string is no longer supported. The fixed string is placement for that, and of course you have to be very careful with your syntax, but we're going to provide every time we see this, we want that. And I'm going to say there's two ways to run this query with raw data or not. So raw data, if you say true raw data, it's going to show you every instance throughout your database where search string exists. And if you wanted to dig in and take a look at all of those individually, then say true, yes. But by saying false, we don't want the raw data. We're only going to get the individual uh, the distinct fixes and the queries that will reveal this information. So it all comes again, as I said, in the form of a JSON result. And so we'll put this into our favorite JSON viewer and examine this result. Whoop, what did I click? There it is. Another window. We'll pop it over here and create a new window. And so I've pasted my resulting JSON, and a Notepad++ lets me format that with a nice tool, but whatever you have to look at it. So here's the return that you get, saying that in the table ABT action form fields, they're in the column input data, this search string exists, and it's giving you the select that's necessary to take a look at that, and it's giving you the update SQL to fix it. And so then we see that it has there are other tables. So action grid settings is another place this exists. It exists within our exception events, the exceptions, and in both in their message and in the message of exceptions. So this is why we're not just globally applying, and I'm not providing a mechanism to just say, yep, just globally replace this. We want you to look at them. We don't want to and think about whether or not you want to apply these. And so in this case, there's no real value that we get by fixing this in the exceptions and exception events table. Those are irrelevant to our programming, but the DNN sharp action grid settings and form fields, these are the places where these fixes are going to be useful. So let's take a look at this. I'm going to grab this select SQL and use it in our SQL console. By the way, if you haven't turned on SQL console, that can be done in the general settings, but it's already on for me. So we got SQL console. We can come in here and run this SQL. Again, a SQL select is inherently not dangerous. So we're going to run the SQL select, and we can see we're getting everything from the form fields, and we can see that in the input data column that this URL that is a problem. This is the actual definition within that form of where we're calling our endpoint. So this is just showing you, oh yeah, this is where the data is. So you could use this as for example, an opportunity to go fix it manually one by one. You can use this data to do that. But we're comfortable with, we very carefully specified our replacement when we ran the query. So, but we'll take a look at this this query that we're going to run and very carefully understand what it's going to do for us. I don't recommend that you run this without looking at it and thinking about it. But what this is saying is it's going to go to form fields table, change the input data. Wherever the input data is like this, so the search string that we were talking about in the first place, it's going to replace it with the API call. And so this is going to globally fix our issue, at least in the forms. So this is going to fix one of these things. So we'll run the query. I'm comfortable that it's safe in my implementation. And so that changes the SQL, excuse me, the SQL data behind the scenes. Now there's this fun characteristic of DNN that it caches a lot of content. And so when you're making changes to database, it's quite often useful to clear the cache. And so if you say, I'm going to clear cache just so that it's very clearly it's going to force that it's going to be reading from the database and not providing an answer. So here's my page before we did that particular fix. I'm going to refresh it, and you're going to see that while one of these grids is still complaining about loading, the radio boxes thing is fixed. And I'm stepping through this very slowly just so that you can see what's going on, but this is the fix has been applied. If we look at radio boxes now, our server request, it got changed to the short format, and we're good to go. All right. So now I want to apply the same global fix to any grid, and that's this other one that it found in the database, that grid settings, and we've got this select statement, which we could use to take a look at it, but I'm just comfortable again that this is going to, I'm happy with this update, so I'm going to apply it. And so we say, again, I'm just breaking this out so you can see very clearly what this is doing, but we're updating action grid. Anytime the value is this string that we were concerned about, we're going to do a replace to change the string to this other to this other string. So we run the query, and again, I'm going to clear cache. So thinking about this, if you had a big site and you had a lot of global things to change, my recommendation would be that you work with a clone of your site or your site offline for a period of time. Build up all these update steps, checking each one to make sure they do what it is that you want to do, so that when you do it in your production, it's you can work through them very quickly, not this one by one. But now you see this grid loads just as you might hope it would. And so that was this grid. No, it was the other one. Take a look at it, but it has updated the data source to be the correct thing. All right. So that's one purpose for the global search and replace. You could do other things with it, and so I'm just going to do one more thing with it. We've been talking about good low coding practices going forward. When we call them, we've got a playbook for how we internally write applications for our clients. And one of the best practices is that instead of using referring to the name of an application or to the URL of the application, that instead we do it by way of a token. And so the value of that particular play is that if you clone an application and it comes up under a different URL, that it isn't accidentally referring back to your production one, rather it comes up knowing that it's just referring to it by the URL domain root, which is whatever the URL, the main URL of the site is. So that's the play. And if we were to look, again, how does this really play out? The best practice then, instead of doing this, where we refer to the site this way, we would do it like this. By referring to it as a token, this then becomes more flexible and is not something that might cause you problems because you're accidentally referring to a production site. I'm not actually going to save this, so I'm just going to close here so that we can see this global change at work. But I will illustrate in tokens, in our test tokens, that this URL domain root returns back the name of the prefix, it's got the protocol and the URL name. So this is by using this, we get the same result, but it's flexible, not hard-coded. Okay. So we could use our global search and replace tool to find all these and replace them with this. So that's the direction we're going next here. So let's see, we don't need this anymore. So close some stuff out. And so we are going to our search and replace, search all tables workflow, and we're going to say, whoop, we are searching for that, and we want to do this instead. And so our tool is going to go find all these and help us fix it. Now there is there's always considerations. When we pass a token like this into a workflow, the token automatically gets expanded. And so if I were to run this particular search, it's going to convert URL domain root to Cafe 148. So the replace string isn't going to be very useful for us. The automatic fix is not going to be is going to continue to refer to the hard-coded URL. I've coded this search all tables to overcome this limitation by providing an alternate delimiter. So I'm going to wrap this in that alternate delimiter so that it doesn't get expanded here on the way in. And again, I just want the fixes, so I don't want the raw data, and I'll do it. You can experiment with this a little bit. Again, running the search is safe. You should look very carefully at the updates before you do it. So here I've got my results. I'm going to put them into my favorite viewer. And so we can see we're selecting from form fields where this string is present, and then the update is changing it from the string to the URL domain root. So I am just going to grab this SQL. And again, we got to figure out where we want to do it. It's worth doing in form fields. It's worth doing in action grid. We don't care about exceptions. All right. Well, I have already vetted this SQL, and so I'm just going to run it. And I'm going to do the other one as well. Run it, and we will clear cache. So if this has worked correctly, I can refresh this page and it's just going to work. It's not going to do anything different. And yes, it all seems to be working. And for example, if I come into a listing and look at the data source, now we see that the URL has been changed to domain root, and that has happened in this other listing, but also in this radio box. So this tool could be used to find and change lots of things. It's not limited to Plant and App specific, it's SQL database specific. So for example, if I were to search for where's all the occurrences of Dale Warner in the database, we can run that. And really, I'm just going to say that I do want the raw data here. I'm not going to do any replacements. I just want to see the occurrences. So this ends up, I do have to provide something here. That's a coding mistake. But this is just going to give us all the places where this particular string exists anywhere in the database. So that's kind of a handy tool, right? And so it tells us that in the users table, display name column, Dale Warner exists at the column of the value for that column is Dale Warner. You could take a look at it by this, and this is SQL you should definitely not run unless you want to change the name to X. But if you have something in your database that you want to search for, but you don't kind of know where it is, or Maybe you have a value that you wish you'd set up differently, and now it's all throughout your database. You can go search for it and fix it. Again, look very carefully at your update SQL. That's we're going to create an update SQL to do what you ask, but you have to, if you ask for the wrong thing, you could do a tremendous amount of damage. Okay, so that is all about fixing that particular broken breaking change and introducing the search all tables as a useful utility that you can take advantage of or not, as you see. And that's the process. So any questions about that, you're more than welcome to post it. I'm going to go talk about one of the other features that is, we're talking a lot today about APIs. And so I'm going to go into APIs and look at this particular one. We had get the users was is the API that we've been using. If we run this API, it doesn't take any inputs, and it's just returning this JSON as output, and that's what's been filling the grid and filling that button. But I wanted to point out by way of a new feature that if you edit an endpoint and look at the settings, there's this new thing called Endpoint URL, and so it's saying that you're going to go to this part is unchangeable /API/, but how you actually call this, you can change it. So the name of the endpoint is no longer enforced to be the same thing as the endpoint URL. And so this gives you the ability to create a version 2 of something or a similar version. And so to see that at work, one of our possibilities would be to clone the endpoint, and it's going to be called get the users version 2, but you might do something like, I can't do that. It doesn't like spaces. But you can change this format to say something like v2/, which would be very particular set. This is up to you, but we're basically adding a folder structure. So you can call it with v2 get the users, and it will do an alternate one. And maybe this one is the same thing, except that here we're creating a list, and we could add a where clause. So here we can save and test this, and now it's only returning one user, not two. But down here in the sample code, we see the calling sequence is API/v2/get the users. So you could have multiple versions of the same thing. So to either, again, the most common one, you'll see it with a lot of API providers, is you've got a version 1 of something, and then you come up with version 2. And so you don't force people to have to change all at once. And just since it's a simple get, I'll point out that you can use this in a browser. As long as you have your past security, you can just call it, and it will show the JSON, the result that comes back. All right, so that's the new feature. We are at 5 minutes left, and if there's any questions, and Patrick, if there's anything that I've missed in all of this, but we've covered the upgrade procedure, recommended procedure, install for 125, and then update to 126. You can update DNN at the same time. You can globally search for things and fix them if you've got a breaking change API thing. On that breaking change for APIs, if you've told somebody else about if you've published an API and they're using the old format, they're going to have to update and use the new format as well. Their API, their call to the API is going to start to fail. It'll give kind of a useful message that says, hey, you need to use the /API format, not the old format. But probably better to warn them in advance. The new format has worked for many, many versions of Plant an App, so they can convert now even before you upgrade. All right. So
I think well, I'd add to that that you also can do the search and replace before you upgrade, so that you don't actually have your broken API. Dale did it the way he did it for demonstration purposes, but certainly it would be wise to do it before you do the upgrade.
very good point. Thank you. Okay, since we have 3 minutes left, I am just going to explore, but this is bonus content right now. The workflow that the search all tables workflow, we just installed it and are using it, but we can walk through what it does. There's kind of some interesting techniques and things that are in here. So first of all, I mentioned this actually installs a SQL stored procedure. And so part of this workflow says if the PAA search all tables stored procedure already exists, then we drop it. So if you install this, you can if we get a later version of this, it's just automatically going to fix remove the old one. We're running a couple of I'm not even sure this is necessary, but some part of the automatic scripting that was part of if you're doing it in SQL Server Management Studio. But then this install PAA search all tables does a creation of the PAA search all tables. It has 3 parameters. It has a lot of nice logic in here that goes and iterates through all the tables in your database, looking for specific column types that it's working on. And so you could investigate kind of how the stored procedure works, but this gets it installed. The next thing, we have this change of tokenization. So if you, this is the place where it applies that special token, I meant special delimiter that I talked about. And so then here it runs the search. So this is executing the stored procedure with a particular set of options, and it's outputting to search list. And one is running the search for the raw data. The other is to run the distinct search. But in either case, it comes out to results. We're creating a JSON array out of the list. And in 126, we have a little bit of a nicer action to do this, but I've coded it the old way, so it will run in pre-126 versions as well. So that's the kind of a quick tour of that. And then there was a question. I'm currently running DNN 9.10.2. Is it safe to upgrade to DNN 9.11.2 as part of this upgrade? And the answer is yes, absolutely. I don't know what version. If you're running version 125, then yes, it's going to, excuse me, if you're running Plant an App 125, as you go to 126, it will offer it. And yes, that's the safe. In general, when we do the updates, we only offer you versions that we think that we are tested with, right? DNN 9.13.3 is out, and we're currently testing with that, but we're not offering that as part of our automatic update because we haven't tested it. So this would be a tested solution. And so yes, when we offer a version and you're using the community version, not Evoke, you can take our recommendation absolutely that it's already tested with that. And then I'll mention 9.13.3 is out, and it's a really great version. There's a lot of good reasons to upgrade to it, and it's still supported. You can upgrade to that, but we haven't specifically tested with that, so you could encounter some things that that we haven't eliminated yet. So Depends on how cutting edge you want to be, but great question. All right, so unless there are any last minute questions, I am going to wrap this up. Glad that you enjoyed it. Thank you, Matt, for your comment. And there's always opportunity to talk about this stuff more and in detail on the Low Code Campfire. I know many of you who are on here take advantage of that. So Low Code Campfire, Friday, 10 a.m. Central, we can dive into any part of this in a deeper way. But thanks for spending your hour with us, and we'll be back here again in 2 weeks with, well, other great low code content. Talk to you then.